Hello, welcome to the Pit Stop Podcast. I'm Braydon Dowler-Coltman. I'm joined by Jordan Dowler-Coltman. How you doing, Jordan?
Good. Ready for some more racing.
It's been a minute. We had a very large event take place at Silverstone last week. We'll get into that and the aftermath that is included. And we've got an exciting race ahead here at the Hungarian Grand Prix at the Hungaroring. Apparently that's the racetrack name. And we'll set that one up this weekend. All right, here we go. Okay, so Silverstone, first lap. Well, first I want to say, what were your thoughts on the qualifying? This is the first time we saw the sprint qualifying. Is this something we're going to see more of? And yeah, did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. I'll just briefly clarify. It wasn't actually last week. We had a whole week off, so it feels like last week because there's a lot of news though swirling around it, obviously for obvious reasons. Yes, let's start with the sprint because that was supposed to be the big story coming out of this. I think everyone thought the funniest thing, and I think both the commentators talked about it a little bit during it. It was the FIA and F1 kept pushing. This isn't a race. This isn't a race. This is qualifying. This is qualifying. It was a bloody race. It was a very short, very fun sprint race, but it was a race, and they were driving like it was a race. And I think that, it looks good for F1 to do something a little bit different. I don't know if all the drivers really love it. I think some of them figured it out. Some of them couldn't quite figure it out. It was entertaining though. They're going to do, I think,
what's to figure out?
More of them. Well, it's just different than what their usual weekend routine is, right? With qualifying, and they have strategy, and certain drivers qualify really well and certain drivers don't. We watched, for example, a guy like Russell, who has had a pretty good season so far qualifying wise. He's getting that Williams to qualify much higher than a lot of people expected him to. But of course, that Williams struggles in bad air. So the minute you get into a sprint, he lost positions from what he had qualified. Had it been a regular qualifying, he would have been able to start further up the grid. But, that's neither here nor there at the end of it. But I thought it was entertaining from a fan perspective. It was a little bit of fun, kind of short. But, to be honest, for me, the biggest winner was Alonso because he totally took advantage of it and really, really demonstrated how good a driver he is. He put the car in some really great passing positions and made some good moves on only 15,
17 laps
racing. Yeah, it was like 18 laps, I think. But he went hard, and in that little bit of time he had, he improved his position. So overall, I was impressed with it.
Yeah, just the idea that you think about baseball and people's gripes with it, it's that it's too long. And sometimes I feel like these races are just a little too long. Not because necessarily they need to be, but the excitement that comes around it being shorter is kind of something interesting. And I wonder if the FIA took that into consideration just to grow the sport. Are the way we've been doing these races forever the way that we should continue to do them? And if they're shorter races, what does that look like for scheduling? And maybe you can get a few, I don't know. There's just there's something kind of interesting about the excitement around fewer laps that I really enjoyed about the sprint this last week.
Yeah. So we will see it again. It sounds like the next one, we weren't sure originally when they were going to schedule it, but it looks like they've announced that the next one will be at Monza. So that's the Italian Grand Prix, which I think is about 4 or 5 races from now. So Monza, one of the fastest tracks, so it should be perfectly set up for a really good another really cool sprint, and that'll be our next chance at it. I think the criticism that the sprint got was mostly just the idea that it only really benefits the teams that didn't qualify well because there's an opportunity for them to get better. It hurts everybody else, but that's the idea, isn't it? The whole point of them trying something different was to try to increase the competitiveness and try to make it more exciting. And that I think it did that. Honestly, I could live without it, and I could live with it. I don't really have I prefer it over the other one. I really enjoy qualifying as it is. I find it really fascinating to just see these drivers try to push as hard as they can, and sometimes you get some nice surprises. But I do think it's fun to mix it up, and it kind of adds a new wrinkle to the
more
season.
Racing. That's what the sport is, and time trials are fun, but yeah, more racing. That was what was awesome. Okay, so that was sprint. That got us to the track on Sunday, and then one lap in. This was also really fun. Let me just preface. This was really fun at Silverstone because there are quite a few, and by quite a few, I mean like 3 British drivers on the track. So hometown fans at the race once again.
Capacity crowd.
So this was a lot of fun with Lewis at the front battling Max Verstappen, who's kind of taken over for the time being as that top driver. One lap in, Verstappen's in the wall. What happened?
Yeah, well, 2 very aggressive drivers going at it, and they make contact at Kopp's corner, and we saw the result. Very serious, heavy crash for Verstappen. Luckily, he walked away. He was okay. May have suffered, a concussion and some sort of minor injuries, but he'll race again this week. So, all things considered, he gets out unscathed. But yeah, it was dramatic, and it was a very contentious situation. Obviously, in the moment, emotions immediately ran high for everybody involved. They had their red flagged the race, so there was some time for both teams to sort of vent. And the stewards, I think, were inundated very quickly with some angry officials from the Red Bull side and some defensive officials from the Mercedes garage. But it was interesting. I was a little surprised, to be honest with you, that it wasn't just considered a racing incident, only because that has been sort of the trend we've seen in the last sort of seasons when it comes to incidents in the first lap that aren't egregious. Right. I think this one was very borderline as far as they made contact on a corner, basically side by side. The question mark about who really owed who what space based on position. It's very tricky. And obviously we're talking about hundredths of seconds to make decisions. And, was Hamilton aggressive? Hell yes, he was aggressive. He knew full well that if he wasn't going to get into the lead during lap 1, he wasn't going to win the race. And so he was driving like his race depended on it. Was he too aggressive?
Kicking up the legs
in the eye of the beholder. Yeah. But Verstappen also, only a moment earlier had been behind, and he made a great pass the previous corner to get back out in front after Lewis had got an edge on him. So both drivers, I think, will look at the incident differently now because of the result. But in the moment, I don't know. It's very tricky for me to judge. I personally didn't hold Lewis to the same level of responsibility that Red Bull obviously does. Now they have a very biased and invested interest in the outcome of it. It was interesting. He got a 10-second penalty,
which he served,
and still won the race. Yeah,
won the race. So does he win this race if this happens on the 5th lap?
How do you mean? If the incident happens on the 5th lap? I don't think the incident could have happened on the 5th lap because I don't think they'd have ever.
Oh, they wouldn't have been that close. Yeah, true.
Yeah, and that's a part of the thing is that's why it's a racing incident. We want competitive racing. We want drivers to be pushing for overtakes. Well, then you've got to have some leniency and understanding that occasionally, they're going to make contact. It was the slightest thing. It wasn't like he cut in front of him. It wasn't like he turned into him. They both were fighting for the same inch of track, and literally, a fraction of contact caused a very serious, and no one's going to deny that it wasn't a serious incident. And of course, with the caps and the money situations this season, it cost Red Bull $1.8 million. It's a serious blow to their overall season budget that they now have to figure out how they're going to stick within. But regardless, it's racing, right? So I don't know. I think it was a little bit overblown. Personally, I think that Red Bull fans will obviously beg to differ because that's what they will do, and that's fine. But I think there's evidence too to the fact that the FIA and Formula One didn't think that there was anything more to be done about it than the 10-second penalty, because Red Bull tried to file a sort of a formal grievance this week, and it was dismissed out of hand, and they said, no, let's move on. And I think that's what we're going to do. Now, does it add some fun new wrinkle and drama to this race for the championship? It definitely does that, and that's where we'll get to see what's next here in Hungary. I wouldn't expect retribution so much as the emotions might just be a little bit higher. We'll see.
Competition. So another guy that lost out on Opportunity, Lando Norris took a pit stop that was like over 4 seconds, and Bottas overtook him, and he was just not able to get that back. Do you think McLaren missed out there?
Norris, you mean?
I do mean Norris, but I mean the team too. Like, these points are valuable, and there is a difference finishing third to fourth.
Yeah, I think Norris. It's tricky. Well, it definitely matters because obviously Leclerc getting second hurts because they're really in a fight with Ferrari. Yeah, and it always sucks when you have a poor pit stop, and we've seen that a few different times. To be honest with you, the beneficiary of it this time, Bottas, has been one of the victims of a few bad pit stops this season and last season already, so he kind of got a little bit of the luck his way this time. I thought Bottas actually had a really great race. He also played, the team role. He was in second as Hamilton was coming back from his 10-second penalty, and the moment that an opportunity was there for Lewis to overtake, Bottas took the team party line and got out of the way and didn't put any kind of stink up. And I think that was good of Bottas to play along and understand where he sits on this team and the fact that Hamilton has a chance at the championship and he just doesn't realistically. So he did a good job that way. But I think that, to be honest with you, as tough as it was for Norris, great race for Ferrari to put themselves back into a position to really push McLaren, who's been dominating. Norris, obviously, we talk about all the time, is the last guy still with points in every race, and his streak continues. But Leclerc, in a limping Ferrari, got that car to the end. He had multiple engine failures throughout the race, and eventually they were having to do things like telling him not to shift gears while on the curbs and all kinds of things. The car was struggling, and a great job by a very, very talented young driver to sort of nurse it home and do so only 3 seconds behind Hamilton at the end. So, great pace out of that Ferrari, even with its struggles. So, positive signs for him too.
We've seen Leclerc, like, in qualifying, he's always pushing that top. So to be able to get it at Silverstone, on. Any last thoughts on Silverstone?
Yeah, the last thing I would say, we talked about in the preview of it a couple weeks ago. You were asking, is there any life left in Ricciardo? Are we going to see him bounce back? And he finished fifth, right behind Norris. He got lots of really important points, 10 points for McLaren, again, to push back and fight against Ferrari. And it was one of his better races, I thought. He had a great little fight with Alonso at one point, and then he had Carlos Sainz right up behind him. And so he was being, pushed by the other Ferrari while they were trying to get as many points away from Ferrari as possible. So honestly, as much fun, and it is a lot of fun to watch the Hamilton Verstappen battle, a great B plot this season is going to be McLaren and Ferrari right down to the wire here, as Ferrari has a great comeback season and McLaren tries to take third place for a second season in a row. So that's kind of a fun B plot, I would say.
That's fantastic. Well, let's leave Silverstone there. Okay, the Hungarian Grand Prix comes at us this Sunday, August 1st. Where does the plot thicken in Hungary for the F1 season?
Well, I think we get to see Hamilton, Verstappen, part 6, part 7, part 8, but the sequel to last week or 2 weeks ago, and I think that's going to be really exciting, just because, anytime you get to go into a race with some quote unquote bad blood leads to some drama, because every little decision both teams make and every little move and pass and driving, error is going to be amplified by this great storyline of these two guys going head to head. Lewis really hasn't had a foil like this, and a competitor fighting against him like this since his own teammate, Nico Rosberg, a few years ago, and the two of them in both Mercedes were the only two really competitive drivers going at it, and the two of them hated each other. And that was fun because it pushed and excelled Lewis, and it made him a better driver. And obviously Nico won a championship under that circumstance as well. So I think Verstappen, who is desperate to still get this championship sort of back in control. He's still in the lead, even without finishing last week. He built a good lead after those 3 back-to-back races we had a couple weeks ago, and now he has to get back some points here, not letting Lewis beat him and take over the championship. So that from that storyline, I'm excited to see what Hungary holds.
Did this race happen last season? I'm just trying to.
So we did race here last year. for the 2020 edition. Lewis won. Verstappen was 2. Bottas was 3, and Lance Stroll was 4th. Lance Stroll actually qualified in 3rd, which was a great qualifying for him, but he wasn't able to get on the podium last year. But I think, and I might be wrong on this, I don't have the thing in front, but as I recall, it was one of his best races last season. I think he got really close to winning that race, or got close to the podium on that race. Perez won at the end as well. If you remember that race, Perez came in and won after the big crash.
Right, big comeback.
Lance Stroll almost, I think, or maybe did get on the podium as well that race, and that was a huge day for Racing Point. But and they were in position. Yeah, that's right. They were in position going into the last race to claim 3rd, and they had such a bad final race of the season that McLaren snuck in and stole 3rd place from them in the Constructors' Championship.
Well, I mentioned Alpine, and they're kind of withering in terms of positioning and where they expect to be, I'm sure. Racing Point had a fantastic year last year. They didn't probably get what they were looking for out of the respective other teams and their pink car, or their copywritten vehicle that looks a lot like a Mercedes. But they've now turned into Aston Martin. I've been promising that we're going to talk about this Bond villain. What's his name?
Lawrence Stroll.
Daddy Stroll.
Lawrence.
That's right. And what's going to happen with this team? Is this team, like you just said, with other vehicles, they're just accepted? This is what this year is going to be on to the next year, or
100%. Yeah, Aston Martin's just going to keep plugging along. They know that this was development year 1, but
how do they fall so far? The competition around them just got better, or I mean, I know they've got a new driver in Vettel, but he's still a fantastic driver.
A lot of teams, nobody could really make huge changes to their car. So you had the same car coming in. Different teams just were more successful in getting the car a little bit further along with the limited resources and money they had, and that's what happened. So I think, and Ferrari bounced back. Ferrari always knew that. I think they had put so much effort into this season's car ahead of time, and that's why they just shut last season's car down so early, knowing that it wasn't going to be competitive, which is why it wasn't. Part of the frustration for Vettel was in the fact that they just had shut down the development of it. So anyway,
all right. Final predictions here for Hungary.
I think we're going to have a spicy one. I think we're going to have Lewis and Verstappen going head to head here. And I don't know who comes out on top. Honestly, I'm afraid to call it anymore because it feels so up in the air. But I think it's going to be one or the other, I would argue. That'll be my prediction. One or the other of the two leaders is going to get the top of the podium.
One or the other. Well, I
don't think we're going to have a surprise winner, is I guess what I'm saying. I think it's going to be Lewis or Max this week.
Be either Max or Lewis. Yeah, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, correct.
So I predicted Tsunoda in 10th last week. I want to take my victory lap because that was successful. Thank you to Max Verstappen who made that possible. Or should I say Lewis for making that possible? My prediction this week, though, I feel like Sergio Perez is going to have a hell of a week and he's going to finish on the podium. That's my prediction for her. Hungary race comes at us Sunday, August 1st. Tune in wherever you can, early morning. Thanks again for listening to the Pit Stop Podcast. We'll see you next week. The Pit Stop Podcast is presented by HatTrick Sports and is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. The show is produced by Jordan and Braydon Dowler-Coltman each week, but mainly Jordan. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening. The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.